Recordings in progress. Okay, Nama Om Vishnu Pataya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachaline Nivasisha Sunyavadi Pashtatara Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, so here we go. Just bear with me 1 minute. Okay, let's get things up here. Okay, excuse me 1 second. I just want to get the nectar devotion. Oh, welcome. Here comes Neela. Nakum, Hare Krishna. So let's begin with, as usual, a prayer that comes in the beginning of the nectar of devotion. From Srinivasacharya, he's glorifying the six Goswamis in the Sat Goswami Astakam. Astakam means 8. So we're just reading one of those verses which Prabhupada includes. So if you have it, welcome, Mother Lisa, Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. So please, you can either listen or join us as you wish. Anashashcha vijayanike nipano saddama samsapako lokanam hitakaruna chubhavane anyasaranya karo Radha Krishna Padada Vinda Bhajanam Namdela Mantalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Ragayago Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Ragayago Shri Jiva Gopalako. So the translation, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizing and studying all the revealed scriptures, excuse me, with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis, and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Jai Sat Goswami Astakam Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. All right, so we made some inroads into chapter 2 last week. So let's get straight into it. I'll just give a quick, very quick review what we covered last week. This we brought up again from the previous week. Rupa Goswami's division of the practice of bhakti into 3, sadhana, bhava, and prema. Remember, each of these has a specific symptom. So there's 6 symptoms in all of pure devotional service. And we went over that a couple of times. Again, please, devotees, if you have questions, you're very welcome to ask. You can either unmute, or you can put it in the chat, or you can wave your golden hand. Yeah. And we're happy to try and answer. Okay. Yeah, we opened up last week. We was asking a question: what's the qualification for taking up bhakti? It's quite interesting what devotees. A lot of what you said was correct, but the actual basic definition is that you have some attraction for it. So that we discussed, and that attraction may come from a previous life. So where does that start? Well, so it could be circular reasoning. So we established something called bhakti or mukhi sukriti. So someone unknowingly may engage in a devotional act. And I think I gave the example of someone who's charitable, if you remember that. Someone who's charitable and they happen to give charity to a Vaishnava. So they did devotion. So bhakti gives bhakti. Okay. So the qualification for practice devotional service, we So a taste, Prabhupada describes it as a taste, the not as if one is at the specific stage of ruchi, which these stages Rupa Goswami will speak about later, but just one has some attraction. One decides to walk into a temple, to speak to a Vaishnava, etc. They're somehow attracted. Okay? And this, let me read this quote here. I thought this is good from Prabhupada. Any Anyway, for persons who have a natural taste for understanding books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, devotion service is easier than those who are simply accustomed to speculate and argue. Right there. So have taste. We have. All right. Then a definition of sadhana. Rupa Goswami gives, and Prabhupada gives a definition of sadhana. So simply put, it's here. Uh, Kuchi Satya, Pabit Satya, Bhava Sasaninadipa. So when transcendental devotional service by which love for Krishna is attained is executed by the senses. So that's the main point here. It's executed by the senses. It's called Chesta Rupa. It's called Sadhana Bhakti. Yeah. Now that execution of that sadhana, potentially it can awaken bhava. So that's a definition of sadhana. All right. So it's good to keep this in mind because we are doing sadhana for that purpose, to develop bhava. And that's the whole subject of it in of itself, which we'll speak more about in a few classes coming up. Okay. So there's your basic definition of sadhana. Well, quite a few devotees coming here, coming in compared to last week. Thank you, those who just joined us. Great to have you with us live, so to speak. Okay. So although this sadhana, it brings on bhava, we have to understand that it's not mechanical. It's not a mechanical process because there's a person there, and Krishna's not a mechanical person. All right. But generally that's how it works. Yeah, we engage our senses in Krishna's service, and then by his mercy and his grace and through purification, our heart becomes purified. Then we awaken love or affection for Krishna. Okay, so we spoke about that last week, so we won't dwell on it too much. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free. Feel free to ask. I'm going through a bit quickly to get to where we left off last week. And then Papa gives an example here. Patrick, please. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, sadhana bhakti is performed by senses
Yes.
and awakens bhava. So why? I mean, this could be maybe I'm not sure if it's a fitting question here, but then all these senses, they are like not purified or contaminated mind senses, and uh, so it's always upsurges sometimes and it goes down sometimes, right? So
What
the
comes up and goes down? One.
the tendency to do sadhana, because it's always difficult to do sadhana like whole um consistently or
Yeah.
with high quality, like more attention and focus.
Yeah.
So but it's still considered as sadhana, right? Is it? Or
It's well, sadhana, as we mentioned last week, from one definite the definition is that sadhana, the chesta, is accompanied by a certain mood. So remember we spoke about the mood being favorable to Krishna. So that should be there. There should be conscious of Krishna while we're engaging in sadhana. Yeah, while we're engaging our senses in service, our mind is also a sense, a very important sense. Yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing is that there's different stages. There's different stages of devotion, and one of the first stages that all devotees go through is called unsteady. It's called anishta bhakti. Yeah, which means one has a particular sadhana they're following, then because they may not be so strong in devotional service, it may not be so steady. So they may chant for 2 weeks, may not chant for 3 days, may follow the regular principles for 6 months and not follow the regular principles for 3 months, like that. So that's called, it's still sadhana, but at that stage, unless one comes to the stage of being nishta, one is fixed in one's basic practices of sadhana, one will not reach bhava for a long, long time. So we're encouraged to come to the stage of nishta. But purification is still happening, but it's slow. It's slow. So in the beginning, everyone starts off at the stage of being unsteady. And then progress means that one becomes steady, becomes nishta. So that's a specific stage of bhakti called nishta. Does that help? So you're still getting purified, but the purification is going to be that much slower. Yeah. Because you're spending less time with Krishna, basically. you you are distracted. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Right, then Prabhupada gives an example here how it actually happens. In other words, the love for Krishna is already there within the heart. So, because we are part and parcels of Krishna, so the process of sadhana is like bringing that out. So there he gives the example of a child learning to walk. And I mentioned it's difficult to get to teach a dog to walk because it's not his nature. It's not, he doesn't have that within him. Yeah, but we have a natural, as a soul, our natural position is to have an affectionate relationship with the Supreme Soul. So sadhana's like that. It's like being like this picture here. A child learns to walk, to bring out that innate tendency. Yeah, Sajkamani Maipu, you had your hand raised there.
Yes, Prabhu. I was going to just mention there in response to the other Prabhu's inquiry just before that it occurs for me at least that when we're thinking about sadhana, it's something that we're practicing, and like I am just now, I'm learning how to juggle, and a lot of learning how to juggle includes like dropping the balls. So that's just what I just mentioned because Prabhu was talking about that our it might go up and down, it might oscillate.
Yeah, that's a good example. So someone who practicing juggling, they may drop in the beginning, but as they practice, the more they can juggle 3 balls, 4 balls, 6 balls, 8 balls. Yeah. So thank you, Sajka Vadima. Perhaps next time I'll change my slide and put a person juggling. All right, and Prabhupada also, Prabhupada, another example is push starting a car. Yeah, that's used there as well. So then I think we got here, if I remember rightly. Does anyone can confirm that? The mad conditioned soul? I think we did. Please, let's see. Normally we'll find out when it sounds very familiar. So interesting in this chapter 2, Prabhupada Prabhupada rightly, from the absolute perspective, the conditioned soul is mad. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada mentions he's engaged in activities which cause bondage. Now, why would someone do an activity that's going to bind one to suffering? So we might conclude what Prabhupada said, it must be a mad person. Yeah. So Prabhupada says here, the origin of the jiva, the soul, is blissful, eternal, and full of knowledge. Then he becomes implicated and he becomes miserable. Why? This is vikarma. So we have akarma, karma, and vikarma. So vikarma means activities which are against injunction, against the Vedic injunctions, vikarma. Yeah. Karma means activities done according to one's position in varna and ashram. And akarma means activities done directly for Krishna, of which there is no reaction, good or bad, except the reaction of becoming purified in establishing a love for Krishna. So Prabhupada speaks quite straightforwardly. Yeah. So Vikama. Yeah. So he mentions, therefore, we must practice sadhana. We have to admit that we are mad and we need to take some medication. Yeah. And our medication is Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So Prabhupada explains sadhana bhakti in a way that we're all familiar with. Now, in later chapters, sadhana bhakti is going to be described in great detail, what it actually means. But for now, Prabhupada has given us as a summary. So it means, for instance, sadhana bhakti means to offer mangalati, deity worship in the morning. All right. So for devotees in the temple, that's quite straightforward. It's quite easy. You go down, you're going like that. At home, it means you're rising a bit early. It means you're organizing your life so you can do some worship at home. You have some sadhana you do at home. Yeah. You have an altar at home. Yeah. So Prabhupada says this is sadhana in the morning. Also, yama and niyama. There's certain activities that we will refrain from. There's activities which are not favorable for our development of bhakti. So that's also a part of sadhana. It's not just activities we do, it's activities that we don't do as well. And those we learn from the spiritual master. And paying obeisance to the spiritual master says, etc. Yeah. So Prabhupada says this will help us to become cured of madness. Yeah. So Prabhupada says that a disease is cured by the direction of the psychiatrist. So this sadhana bhakti cures the conditioned soul. So the mad conditioned soul becomes cured of his madness under the spell of material illusion. I don't know if I gave this example here. You can let me know if I did. But I remember one of our temple presidents, Sachikumar Nima, I will remember him with affection, Mahajuti Maharaj now. And excuse me. He used to live in a mountainous part of America, and regularly at the school he was at, then the local sheriff and the local municipality would come and give talks to the children of what they should do if they get lost in the mountains, because it so happened that sometimes it would happen and someone would die. So the first thing they had to do, the question was asked, what's the first thing that you should do? Does anyone might like to hazard a guess? What's the first thing you should do if you're in the mountains? You think you're lost.
Probably stay in the same place.
Stay in the same place. Yeah.
Yeah, don't panic.
Don't panic, Mr. Mandarin. Don't panic. Yeah, such says. But actually, the first thing you have to do is admit you're lost. So a lot of people will lose their life because they refuse to admit they're lost and just keep walking until they're completely exhausted. And sometimes they walk in a big circle, and they won't throw up any alarm or any signs or any, whistles or flares or anything like that because they don't want to admit they're lost. Anyway, a side example that's not in the nectar devotion, okay? But yeah, we have to admit that we are in a disease condition. We're identifying with this body and we're doing things that we're going to cause further bondage. So Prabhupada speaks about that here, the mad conditioned soul, And now, then it brings up another very important point in sadhana. As we mentioned, Chesta Rupa means engaging the senses, and especially here is highlighted engaging the mind. Yeah. Here. Now, it's considered such an important point of bhakti, like for instance, it's considered such an important bhakti that this example is given from the 7th canto. Yeah. Someone would like to read this verse for us? Good to hear other voices out there apart from mine.
My dear King Yudhisthira, the gopis, by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familial relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have obtained the mercy of Krishna.
Right, so this is Narada Muni. So because we might question, because we remember when we spoke about the Paribhasha Sutra, Anyabhalasata Sanyam, that an aspect of activity should be done with favorable intent. So here, Kamsa and Shishupal, they are demons. Yeah. So their bhakti is anukul. But the lesson from here for us as sadhakas is that they was absorbed in Krishna. Kamsa was absorbed. Shishupal was obsessed with Krishna, always thinking of him. So that aspect is part of sadhana bhakti, it's part of bhakti. So that's why this verse is brought out. Yeah. It's not to glorify the so-called Krishna consciousness of Kamsa or Shishupal. And it so happens because of the nature of Krishna, as we know, they was killed by Krishna, and thus they did get mercy. But what the lesson we're supposed to take from this is the importance of fixing the mind on Krishna. Yeah. This is what. And so therefore, the duty of the spiritual master, he will find the ways and means for his disciples to fix their mind on Krishna. Yeah. Like in the beginning, as we hear, Prabhupada experimented with his new disciples, devotees, and first he asked them to chant 64 rounds a day. They found that very, very difficult. So Prabhupada therefore gave us a whole institution. Of course, it suits the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So he would engage his disciples in so many different activities. Yeah, so that's the beginning of sadhana. The spiritual master will find the ways and means so the mind can be fixed on Krishna. Yeah, and of course, Prabhupada brings out that Lord Chaitanya has given us an authorized program for this purpose, which centers around chanting Hare Krishna. Yeah, so this he mentioned has so much power that it attracts Krishna. So that's the beginning. Also, we know it's the means and it's the ends, but definitely from the perspective of the beginning of bhakti, we have to engage the mind. Yeah, the mind should be absorbed in Krishna. So somehow or another, even somehow or other, yeah, we want to fix our mind upon Krishna. Then he's also referring to Maharaj Ambrish, Shavai Mana Krishna Pada Vindayo, Vachasi Vikuntu Ganana Varane, Hari Mandi Majinadi Shu, Shutim Shakum Shatkat Kadodaye. So there's a verse that describes, there's 3 verses that describe Maharaj Ambrish engaged all of his senses. His eyes in seeing the beautiful form of the Lord, his legs in going to the temple, his tongue in tasting the remnants of food, his nose in smelling the tulsi leaves offered to the Lord, his arms in embracing devotees, his mind in making plans to serve Krishna. So he is a matpada, a great devotee. So we can learn from him. Yeah. Then the more we can engage all of our senses for long lengths of time in Krishna's service, we will make rapid progress in Krishna consciousness. The more that we can always be absorbed in Krishna somehow or another. Yeah. So that's mentioned there. Any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah. Somehow or other, want us to fix it. So that's why this verse is quoted here, glorifying Shishupal and other kings. Yeah. Even Narada Muni, in his great ecstasy, he actually puts the demons above him because they're so absorbed in Krishna. They're so absorbed in Krishna. Kamsa was so absorbed in Krishna. So in his profound humility, he puts the demons in sometimes above him. Yeah. Okay. Right. Now, Sachi, come on, you might please. Yeah, you have your hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Pooh, because we know that pastime, I think it's in the third canto, I forget now, Jai and Vijay are cursed, and they're they're in the spiritual world, and they're devoted. I don't know if they're devotees, but I often think that they had the benediction. They could come a certain number of times as demons, or other times as devotees, and then they would come quicker. But I'm just wondering if there's a distinction between them being devotees and others who are inimical to Krishna but are not devotees. That's just my inquiry there.
Well, it's definitely a distinction in one sense, but they were more or less as if they were non-devotees. They were covered. So they were not aware of their, as far as I understand, they weren't just playing the role of being archetype type demons. They was covered by the Lord's Chogamaya potency. So they acted out demons. So if there's any difference, that would be one, is that it was arranged by the Lord that they fall. It was arranged by the Lord that they take on demonic principles. Yeah. Just like Arjuna, it was arranged that he would forget transcendental knowledge and become and identify with his body and therefore his family members and feel affection for them. So that's as much as I can say in that, unless you got any other insights. That's the distinction. Their fall down was arranged by the Lord, specifically arranged to suit his Leela and pastimes. So those playing quite a unique role. But others, no, they're demons. Yeah, but they still get purified. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. And I guess also, you could argue that we are all constitutionally servants of Krishna as well in that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, you could say that. Even the most demonic person, ultimately, yeah, but they're covered by the Lord's external energy. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Not the internal energy. Yes. All right. So moving on. It's mentioned that there's two types of sadhana. I just read this here to begin with. When there is no attachment or no spontaneous loving service to the Lord, and one is engaged in the service of the Lord simply out of obedience to the order of the spiritual master, or in pursuance of the scriptures, such obligatory service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. So there's two types of sadhana. One is mentioned here, yeah, in two parts. So one is known as Vaidhi sadhana, one is known as Raganuga sadhana. So sometimes it's a bit unclear of what exactly Raganuga sadhana is. So if you have any questions on that, we can answer as we go. We can try anyway. Okay. So this is where devotional service begins. It's going to begin with following the instructions of the spiritual master. For example, when we take initiation, we vow to chant 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra. Yeah, and the reason in the beginning we may chant 16 rounds is because we've been told to. Yeah, we made a promise to. There was the Guru was there, the Vaishnava was there, the deities were there, and we made a vow. So following that is called Vaidhi. Yeah. There may not be a natural attraction in the beginning, but we follow. So that's called Vaidhi. And Prabhupada mentions here, I'll just read from the Nectar of Devotion. The first part is called service according to the regulative principles. And one has to follow these different orders or principles. Why? By the order of the spiritual master. the order of the Guru and on the strength of scripture. He mentions there can be no question of refusal. Otherwise, don't accept Guru. Okay? That's the idea of Guru. He gives you direction and you follow. So that's called Vaidhi. And he mentions one has to follow without argument. All right? So unless you're ready to do that, then you should think twice about taking initiation. Okay? Unless you're ready to do it. Of course, we should want to. The Guru is only going to tell us to do what's good for us. Yeah. Now then he mentions there's another part of sadhana, and that's called Raganuga. Now please take note, it's called Raganuga sadhana. Yeah. Vaidhi sadhana, sadhana means practice, and Raganuga sadhana, practice. Okay. So we'll emphasize that more, a little bit more. So sadhana in coming up. But for now, Raganuga means that one Prabhupada gives a simple definition. It's where by following Vaidhi, one becomes more attracted. One becomes attracted and one executes devotion out of a natural love. They want to do it. They are naturally attracted to doing it. You know. Now, that, and Prabhupada speaks about that, and I've put the whole, because I think it's important. He speaks about that here. No, someone would like to read this, and then we'll comment upon it after. Someone could read this. Any readers out there?
Raganuga refers to the point at which, by following the regulative principles, one becomes a little more attached to Krishna and executes devotional service out of natural love. For example, a person engaged in devotional service may be ordered to rise early in the morning and offer arti, which is a form of deity worship. In the beginning, by order of the spiritual master, one rises early in the morning and offers arti, but then he develops real attachment. When he gets this attachment, he automatically tries to decorate the deity, prepare different kinds of dresses, and thinks of different plans to execute his devotional service nicely. Although it is within the category of practice, this offering of loving service is spontaneous. The practice of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, can be divided into two parts, namely regulative and spontaneous.
Okay. So from this, so who likes coming to the temple? Who likes when they can making it to Mangaladi? Yeah, there's a few hands going up. So someone like yourselves or someone you may know who has a liking for devotional activities, does that mean they are a Raganuga Bhakta, according to this? So Neela's shaking her head. She's saying no. Anybody else? I guess the question I'm asking is implying. Why not, Neela? Can you explain more? You're saying no, then they are not a Raganuga. They're not practicing Raganuga sadhana. But Prabhupada says, can you?
Yeah, I mean, coming to the temple and wanting to do things, that doesn't mean that we're actually doing Raganuga Bhakti, because that would be doing 16 rounds daily minimum, and
Yeah, that's
within
interesting.
the four principles. So it's a slightly different angle.
Yeah, so not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else on this? Comments upon it? Lisa, you had your hand raised.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Is it because although we might enjoy going to Mangalarti, it's maybe more for ourselves rather than purely
that's a good point.
to please Krishna?
Yeah, it may be for a self, but the self is a servant of Krishna. So you may enjoy it as a servant of Krishna going. Purna Kishore?
I think one very simple way of distinguishing is when you're doing things above what the regulatory basic mandatory requirements are, that's got to be, and you're doing it, and also doing that out of love. or some sort of affection, and that's got to rise beyond just practice. Because let's say you've done all your rounds, and you've done your Mangalati, and you've done everything you've done your morning class and everything, and then in the afternoon you decide, well, I'm just going to chant another 12 rounds because I just want to feel Krishna, I want to be near to Krishna.
You're attracted.
I think that's when you kind of, it's the additional amount above the difficulty with the, as Nina pointed out, the difficulty with just doing the basic mandatory requirements is it could be because you want something material like liberation, or you want you want
true,
something
but for all intents and purposes, it could be, according to what Prabhupada's written here, it's defined as Raganuga. Say, let's take example of a devotee in a temple. Okay, they're chanting the 16 rounds, they're following regular principles, and at some point they love going to Mangaladi. Or say a pujari, they're thinking of how to dress the deities, so I'm dressing Radha Krishna. I'm thinking of who made the garlands yesterday, what type of garlands they make, and I check out the outfit before, and I know what jewelry's there, and I really want to put on this certain type of jewelry, which I really like, that matches with this outfit, etc. So that could, according to what Prabhupada says here, that could easily be termed as you're practicing not Vaidhi, you're practicing Raganuga sadhana. Satchikumar, you had your hand raised, then it went down.
Yes, Prabhu. I just, because I think your inquiry was that would that be considered spontaneous? Would that be considered Raganuga? And just how it occurs for me is that Srila Prabhupada would always be very generous in his kind of evaluation of the service that devotees are performing. So I just think that maybe Prabhupada, out of his generosity, would also include that in some kind of loving devotional service.
And natural. I think you're right there, Satchikumar Nimai. I think you're right. But the point I want to kind of bring out here is that this definition is not, it's an aspect of Raganuga centering on this here. It's an aspect. It's not a complete definition. The full definition of Raganuga is going to come in chapters 15 and 16. The spontaneous devotional service, spontaneous devotion further described. Okay, so Prabhupada's bringing out the underlying principle of Raganuga, where it's natural for you and you like to do it. That's the underlying basic principle of Raganuga. I went forward and got a quote from the 16th chapter, which gives us more of a complete definition. But I just want to highlight what Prabhupada's bringing out here, the principles of Raganuga. See, I've highlighted them. One becomes a little more attached to Krishna. That's one aspect of Raganuga. It's natural. That's another aspect, Real attachment. Raga means attachment. Raga nuga means raga. There's some real attachment. That's an aspect of Raganuga. Automatic. It means you're doing it not because you've been told to. That's an aspect of Raganuga. Thinking how to serve in different ways. That's an aspect of natural attraction. But Prabhupada's now, this part here, although it is within the category of practice, this offering of loving service is natural, it's spontaneous. Okay. Now if we go further, I just read this quote from chapter 16, and it gives I think it's 15 actually. Okay, so here's a more complete definition. What Prabhupada is given here is some aspects of Raganuga. So he says, persons desiring to follow in the footsteps of such eternal devotees of the Lord, such as the Vishnus of Vrindavan Denzins, are called Raganuga devotees. Okay, so that's more of a definition. That means you are inspired in your devotion by the Lord's eternal servants in Vrindavan. That's what inspires you. Now that's becoming more of a complete definition. Yep. So they're called Ragatmaka Bhaktas. So a Raganuga devotee following Raganuga sadhana, their inspiration comes from the servants of the Lord in the spiritual world. All right. So, and they will, and so what does Raganuga sadhana means? Okay, so someone's inspired by the resonance of the spiritual world, but it doesn't mean they are liberated or perfected devotees. They are still sadhakas. They are still practitioners. They are still conditioned souls. But their inspiration for bhakti is coming from Krishna and Krishna's associates. Yeah. And therefore it's said, and we'll get into this a bit more when we get there, but for now, continuing, these Raganuga devotees do not follow the regular principles of devotional service very strictly. What does that mean? Well, that means that their heart is attracted to raga, not to vidhi. They're serving because of natural attraction. Yeah. It doesn't mean they don't follow the four regulative principles. That happens to be a natural characteristic of someone attached to Krishna. Okay. So, but by spontaneous nature, they become attracted to some of the eternal devotees as Nanda and Yasoda. Okay, so there's lots written about this by acharyas. We won't get into all the details now, but just a little sprinkle of information. There's a stage in bhakti called Varana Das, where one accepts as one's major inspiration a particular associate of the Lord in one of the four rasas. Okay, where you accept and you're following them. That's another definition of Raganuga sadhana. And you're following their footsteps. Yeah. And your ambition is to serve like they do. But you're still a conditioned soul. Okay. It's Raganuga sadhana. Now, this part is important. We must always remember, however, that such eagerness to follow in the footsteps of the denizens of Raj is not possible unless one is freed from material contamination. In following the regular principles of devotional service, there is a stage called Anartha Nivritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Sometimes someone is found imitating such devotional love, but factually he is not freed from anarthas or unwanted habits. It has been seen that so-called devotees proclaim himself a follower of Nanda, Yasoda, or the gopis, while at the same time his abominable attraction for mundane sex life is visible. Such a manifestation of divine love is mere imitation and has no value. When one is actually spontaneously attracted to the loving prince of the gopis, there will be found no trace of any mundane contamination in his character. Right, so that's some more of a broader definition of Raganuga sadhana. Yeah. Any questions? Is that a bit more clear now for you? Yeah. Hornikishore, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I had one point, but I've now got another point
Please,
as well.
yeah.
So I mean, one of the things that hit me on the quote that you've got up,
Yeah.
that is very difficult to achieve. So I read execute devotional service out of natural love. So that could be natural love for Krishna or devotional service, or natural love for devotional service. But then later on it says this offering of loving service is spontaneous. So it's love of, if it's love of Krishna, and that's very difficult to achieve, because you can have attachment to your friend or somebody, doesn't mean you necessarily have love for them. I mean, you probably might do if they're a very close friend, but attachment and love are two different levels, aren't they? So
yeah, attachment is a Shakti. Yeah. So Shakti will come before Bhava in the different development of Bhakti. But in one sense it is difficult. I mean, it's not like buying a packet of basmati rice in a supermarket. It takes, but it's not, but it is possible if we follow the teachings that Rupa Goswami is giving us. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah. Also, you can say otherwise, if it's so difficult, Why would they, why would we even try? Point I'm trying to make is that, yes, it takes some purification, it takes some spiritual development, but it can be achieved. It's a stage in bhakti that can be achieved. The same as we are unsteady, then you become steady. Yeah. So once you become steady, then the next stage is you become free of anarthas and most of the impurities. Then so you've achieved that stage. All right. So if you've so then you go to the next stage is you become, after anarthas become fixed. Okay, now you're more fixed. And then you develop ruchi. You have a strong taste for the activities of bhakti. Then you find yourself spontaneously attracted. So then that's a shakti. And then bhava. So if we're at, in other words, if we're at the stage of unsteady bhakti and we come to the stage of steady bhakti, what's going to stop us from going to other stages? Nothing's going to stop us if we follow the teachings that's given to us. Yeah, so it's definitely possible. Yeah. All right. But from a point of humility, it's another aspect of devotion. We think, okay, wow, I'm so fallen, I'm so this, I'm so that. How can I possibly obtain these stages of devotion? Yeah. But we should not forget Krishna is very, very merciful. Yeah. And we just try our best according to our ability. And Krishna is going to give us his mercy. We should be convinced of that Krishna is very merciful. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this before we move on? Raganuga Bhakti is a big subject. We will speak about it more in chapters 15 and 16. But if you have any questions at this point, please feel free to ask. Patrick, you have your hand raised, and then Sachikumar.
Prabhu, you said, so you said Anishtha and Nishtha
Yeah.
for sadhana bhakti, right?
Yeah.
And then we also talk about Vaidhi sadhana and Rupanuga sadhana. Sorry, Raganuga sadhana.
Yeah.
Sorry, Raganuga sadhana.
Yeah.
Uh,
Stage, can it be practiced?
so Anishtha stage also can have some level of Raganuga principle appearing, because you're following the principles, and then devotees develop some taste, like they start making plans. So there's steady to unsteady journey, and there's also Vaidhi to Raganuga journey happening at the same time, is it?
Yeah, so that's why Prabhupada is bringing this aspect of Raganuga out, just one aspect of it in this quote I've put up.
Okay.
And that's you like doing things for Krishna. So yeah, but it's not a complete definition, but the mood is good, because that is what is the mood of Raganuga. It is this, you are naturally attracted to do it. Yeah, but it's not a full definition. Yeah. So generally, as Prabhupada said, quote, then generally Raganuga sadhana is going to be practiced at least at the stage of Nishtha. One is fixed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sachikamar, you had a question, I think, or someone else?
Yes, Prabhu. I was just reflecting actually as you were kind of sharing about some of the details. And it was just reminding me that, I think the subtitle for the Nectar of Devotion is the complete science of devotional service. And like in many sciences, there's a simple part which says 2 + 2 = 4, and then it can get a lot more complicated than that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So here you're getting the ABCs. Okay. Prabhupada's just introducing the underlying principle of Raganuga sadhana. So the ABCs, 1 + 1. But there's a lot more to be understood. And we just gave a little, we mentioned a little something called Varanadas. And one's sadhana will change according to further give them smaran. Yeah, one's actual sadhana will change to enhance their bhajan, in their particular attraction to Krishna. And that's a whole big subject, okay? But they're basic definitions. There's two types of sadhana. So someone a Vaidhi, someone who's following Vaidhi sadhana, they're a conditioned soul. A person who's following Raganuga sadhana, they're a conditioned soul. Yeah, but they get their inspiration from different places. Liberated soul is bhava. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions I missed there? Please feel free to ask. Time check, 11:22. Okay. Let's move on, shall we? Okay. It's exciting now. Let's see where we're going now. Is there any? Okay. So again, back to the principles, back to Vaidhi, okay? He mentions, now this is a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Can anyone tell me, by reading this verse, you can read it there, this is a verse which is showing the principle of Vaidhi. Can anyone explain why is it Vaidhi? Rupa Goswami quotes it to show this principle of Vaidhi. Sukadev Goswami is explaining to I could have done this picture better. You can't see Sukadev Goswami. Anyway. So why is this Vaidhi?
Sorry.
Purnakishore?
It's because the outcome is to be fearless in meeting your death, not love of Krishna.
Yeah, but not the answer. No, something else. Sajikumar?
I'm thinking also because it mentions hearing and chanting, but there's also the order of the spiritual masters, what I hear there as well.
Yeah, let's just, other devotees had their hands up, 2 more devotees. I can just, any other points on this?
Krishna Prabhu, I was going to say the same thing as Sachikumar.
Same thing, yeah.
He's following the instruction of the spiritual master.
Yeah, you've got it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So if you want to be fearless, you should do this. Then you must begin strictly. You must begin following the process of hearing and chanting. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It's being told to do it. Yeah, so that's how it's Vaidhi. Yeah. You tell him what's his course of action. Yeah. Yeah. So very good. And Prabhupada mentions here, if one can chant and hear Hare Krishna and always remember Lord Krishna, then he's sure to become fearless of death. Prabhupada puts that in, yeah, which may come at any moment. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, may come at any moment. Just like we have our dear Krishna Priya on our reception. You know, everyone, we had dear Krishna Priya in our temple. He says, you say to him, see you tomorrow. He says, Krishna willing. And Krishna willing, yes, I will see you tomorrow. Who's to know? So yeah, so Prabhupada mentions about becoming, he mentions on the top of this, to become fearless at death, which may come at any moment. We should chant the holy name of Krishna. Okay. And then some quite strong inspiration for this hearing and chant. Again, Vaidhi, but some quite strong inspiration. Yeah. So therefore, Sukadev Goswami mentions we should always hear about Krishna. Yeah. So in other words, as we gave the definition in the beginning, Anyabalasata Sunyam, it means it's not hearing and chanting about Indradev, not hearing and chanting about Durga or etc. It's about Krishna specifically. Yeah. And then Prabhupada is bringing out here as well that anyone who becomes a devotee is never vanquished. Then he quotes, yeah, so Prabhupada mentions vanquished. It's good. Prabhupada's use of words is quite wonderful. Vanquished. It kind of means, what does it mean, vanquished? It means you're completely annihilated. You're completely lost everything. You've been vanquished. You've been destroyed. Yeah. So it mentions after getting this human form of life, if we don't come out, if one doesn't come out of the entanglement of birth and death, and he misses this golden opportunity. Yeah. If we missed it, and then what will happen? When we'll be thrown by the laws of nature. Yeah, like here, this is a classic ISKCON picture, one of the wonderful pictures used in many. It's used all over the world and all different forums now. This picture, this is an ISKCON artist, really good, isn't it? See the old age coming, then death, life again, or otherwise you may go down. The animal species finally get a human. So if we don't take this opportunity, as Nectar Devotion is giving us, of hearing and chanting about Krishna, we do not know where we will be thrown by the laws of nature. Yeah. So then Prabhupada quotes here, Nehi Bikramo Nasosti Pratyavaya Vichati Sadalpamapidama Shatrayati Mahato Bhayat. So Bhayat means fear. In this endeavor, hearing and chanting about Krishna, there is no loss. You'll never lose anything. Yeah. Anyone lost anything before? It's not very nice, is it? You lost your files on your computer, you lost your keys, or something gets stolen. But with Bhakti, it doesn't happen. There's no such thing as losing. You may forget, you may get covered, but it's always there. Yeah. So there's no loss or diminution. And if you make a little advancement, just a little, it can save you from the dangerous type of fear. And that dangerous type of fear is losing the human form of life. Yeah. And the human form of life is great to have because you can engage in devotional service. Yeah. So this is why Rupa Goswami is mentioning, this is why we should apply our minds in Krishna consciousness very seriously, Prabhupada says. Yeah. And he quotes from then there's a quote from the Padma Purana, which you may have heard quite a few times in classes. Smartavya sadatam Vishnu, Vishmatavyo na chaduchit, Savaviti nisetyasyo itayo eva kinkaraha. So one should always remember Krishna and never forget him. All the injunctions and prohibitions are dependent on these two principles. Yeah. So many rules and regulations within the practice of devotion, even many things to do, many things to avoid. Yeah. So and in the whole body of the Vedas, there's so many rules and regulations. Some of them can even appear contradictory. Yeah. So what's the essential underlying injunction in Vaidhi? It's here. One should always remember Krishna and never forget him. Purnakusha had a question, came up. I saw your hand raised and then it went down.
Yes, Prabhu, sorry. I think you were just mentioning earlier, I just want to get it clear in my head. So if you're Raganuga Bhakti and you've approached your natural relationship with Krishna, you found out that you're supposed to be a parental relationship. Does that mean that you will or would not follow the regulative principles, or will you follow them with a different flavor? How does that work?
What will be different? Everything. What will be different is your inspiration for doing the activities of bhakti. Yeah. That's so both devotees, someone who's now you're speaking about when you mention the word you have attracted to a specific rasa. That's quite a high level of achievement in Raganuga, okay? But let's just say one has achieved that, Varanadas. Yeah. So you'll just be offering arti with a different mood than you was 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah, you'll just be inspired. Your inspiration's coming from another place. Yeah. That's a difference. Yeah. You may not necessarily there may be some adjustments to your sadhana, your personal bhajan, but generally you'll be following what everyone else does. So just keep in mind that Raganuga sadhana is a religion of the mind. Externally, everything stays the same.
Right.
You still queue up for Prashadam. You still, you know, engage in activities directed by the authorities in the temple, but your inspiration is not, it's natural and it's coming from the inspired by the residents of Vrindavan. Is that clear? Yeah.
Yeah, very useful. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So, so which injunctions to follow if you're doing Vaidhi? Okay, there's lots there, but this is the main one. Always think of Krishna. Now, Satadam, this is something from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, which I thought was quite interesting. Although, you know, we shall get there, but Satadam means every day, actually. It doesn't mean every second, because for someone who's practicing Vaidhi, it would be too difficult. It's impossible, because the heart is filled with so much other stuff. Yeah, just like sometimes our houses or our places have so much stuff in them. So our hearts are filled with other stuff. So therefore, it may not be possible to always think of Krishna. Yeah, so that means it may be, one may feel disappointed that they can't come to the basic principle of Vaidhi. But it means at least some point in the day you can think of Krishna. He should be thought of every day. Yeah. Yeah. So here there's things, Vaidhi, Vidhi, and Nisheda, rules and orders and prohibitions. Yeah. Now, this applies universally. Yeah. This hearing and chanting about Krishna is mentioned by Rupa Goswami. It's not just for the sadhakas, actually. Really, it's for everyone. Yeah. So these principles ideally should be followed by all varnas and ashrams. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's someone like to read this verse for us, just the translation. Just the translation is fine. Any readers out there?
I'll do it, Prabhu.
Go ahead. Thank you, Neela. Mother.
By worshipping me through the various methods prescribed in the Vedas and Tantras, one will gain from me his desired perfection in both this life and the next life.
Yeah, so everyone is encouraged. This is Vana Ashram Dham, yeah. All the four orders, the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, etc. Where have they come from? They're born actually out of the universal form of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, this is Purusha Shukta confirmed. There's a chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ultimately, they're all coming from the cosmic body of the Supreme. So therefore, everyone has as their innate duty to engage in the activities of Shravanam, Kirtanam. Yeah. Now, if they're not doing that, then one will fall down. One will fall down from their position to the lowest positions of Malecha and Javanas in society and fall outside of the Vedic paradigm, so to speak. Yeah. If they neglect this, yeah. Just like, for example, we have something you may find you have good meaning and one sense and good meaning, good intention. Someone may be in Bharat, for instance, and maybe in India, they're living in a dharmic situation, you know, then they decide to come over to the West and get educated, and they start mixing with persons who don't give a hoot about any regulative principles or virtues, you know, students taking drugs and everything else. So one gets influenced by them, then one starts, you know, giving up their sattvic principles. They came as a vegetarian, then they begin to eat non-veg food because their students are doing it. I mean, you get the picture. So one falls down and becomes, Aimalecha or Javana. Yeah. So you got to hope that wasn't, yeah. So this is the point here. Yeah. Let me just read this part here. We can obtain worldly success and heavenly enjoyment by adhering to the minute details of Varnashram. Yet even, yeah, this is an important point. So you may follow Varnashram Dham, and even if we completely neglect every one of these rules, but if we take the activities of devotion, always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him, yeah, that's the most important principle. If we're working very hard according to our position in society, but we're not remembering Krishna, then it's considered to be Shama Eva Hi Kevalam. It's a waste of time. Yeah. And Prabhupada mentions here, this is in Narada Pancharatrika, the regulative principles of devotional service are described as follows. Any activities sanctioned in the real scriptures and aiming at the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are accepted by saintly teachers as the regulative principles of devotional service. If one regularly executes such service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, then he gradually rises to the platform of pure love of God. Okay? And someone could read this for us?
I could.
Go ahead. Thank you so much.
If the whole society performs its respective duties and remains in Krishna consciousness, there is no doubt that all of its members will live very peacefully and happily. Without wanting the necessities of life, the whole world will be turned into Vaikuntha, a spiritual abode. Simply let him worship Lord Krishna by the result of his activities in Krishna consciousness. That will adjust the whole situation and everyone will be happy and peaceful within this world.
Yeah, so as Sajkumar said, this is one of Prabhupada's encouraging us, yeah, making it, calling out for the whole world. As he mentions, remember in the beginning, in the preface or in the introduction, Prabhupada mentions that these teachings in an act devotion, if we follow them, will create peace and happiness throughout the whole world. Yeah, that would adjust the whole situation, and everyone will become peaceful, happy and peaceful within this world. It sounds like an impossible hope, but this is the Vaishnavas. We have this hope. At least let's try to make this happen. Yeah. All right. Any closing questions or comments on here on chapter 2? All right. Covered quite a few principles there. Talking about the mad conditioned soul and the importance of fixing the mind. Yeah, this is the principle of Vaidhi. So this example is brought up of Kamsa, Evan, and Shishupal. And we had, hope you're a little bit more clear now on the two types of sadhana. One's Vaidhi, one's Raganuga sadhana. And we described, give you more of a broader understanding. Prabhupada introduces the basic principles of Raganuga sadhana. Yeah. And if we want to be fearless, this is how we become fearless, by hearing and chanting about Krishna. Otherwise, we'll be thrown into the cycle of birth and death again and again and again. All right. And of all the rules and regulations, again, this is the principle to always remember Krishna. It should be followed by everyone. Yeah. Chapter 2 is completed. Hare Krishna. All right. Let me bring up chapter 3. Bear with me 1 minute. Hare Krishna. 1 second. Mm. Mm. I've lost the zoom on the thing. 1 second. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Getting there. Portion of screen. Share. Getting closer. Nearly there. Nearly there. There you go. Chapter 3. Okay. Now we will stop at what's the time now? We'll stop at 12. We can have a break at 12. So let's go for 15 minutes. So chapter 3. All right. So now the introduction has given a definition of pure devotional service. And we all know the verse, you can recite along. Anya Bilasada Sanyam Gyana Kamari Anavritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Silanam Bhakti Uttama. So that's one of your memorization verses. That gives a definition of pure devotional service. Then chapter 1, we described the 6 characteristics. And chapter 2, we got into the practice, an introduction to the practice of sadhana with a definition. Now here, we're going to look at the basic qualification for practicing devotional service. We touched on it a little bit in the beginning of chapter 2, but more is going to be spoken of it here. So the eligibility for the candidate for accepting devotional service, okay? So it's an interesting discussion. Someone could read, we discussed this principle as well, causeless as well, in chapter 2, but someone would like to read this for us on the slide? Anyone who's not read so far?
One may attain a little bit of attraction for Sri Krishna, but at the same time, one may remain very much attached to fruitive activities and material sense enjoyment and not be prepared to undergo the different types of renunciation. Such a person, if he has unflinching attraction to Krishna, becomes an eligible candidate for discharging devotional service.
Okay. So we've touched on this to some degree in chapter 2. But what's being highlighted here is that there's no prerequisites for taking up sadhana. Yeah. Even you do not, in the beginning, you do not even need knowledge or detachment. So this is as opposed to other sadhanas, say the path of Pramananda or impersonal schools. They're very strict. For example, if you cannot take up their practice unless you become sannyasi, unless you renounce everything, you cannot take up the path of Mayavad in some schools of Mayavad. You have to renounce everything. But that's not required in bhakti. And it's good to keep that in mind, especially when we may be preaching to people who are coming to the temple. Yeah. That is no prerequisites. Yeah. If they have some attraction, yeah. So even though one maybe still comes with quite strong attachments, yeah. If they have an ongoing attraction, even they may not be so steady. If they have an ongoing attraction to Krishna, an ongoing favorable attitude towards devotees, those persons are candidates for being successful in spiritual life. You follow? Yeah. This is, if you have your hard copy, this is the first paragraph there in chapter 3. Okay. Now, Rupa Goswami expands upon this by bringing out this verse here. I can just read this one here. My dear Uddhava, only by exceptional fortune does someone become attracted to me, And even if one is not completely detached from fruitive activities, or is not completely attached to devotional service, such service is quickly effective. Yeah? So in other words, even if one is still attached to material life, he can begin practicing devotional service. Yeah? I think that might be our case in the beginning, or to some degree even now. We're dealing with different material attachments, gross or subtle, but we can still practice devotional service because we have an attraction for it. Yeah, we have an attraction for it. Yeah. Remember when I was first taking up devotional service, I didn't think I would ever be able to overcome my attachments, gross attachments. But somehow or another, I was attracted to the devotees, and I kept coming to the temple, despite never dreaming I could come to some level of practicing what they practiced. Yeah? But I was attracted to the devotees, attracted to the temple. Yeah? And eventually that had its effects. There's a very important point that's being made here by Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami. Okay? It's such service is quickly effective. Yeah? So even if one has so many hang-ups, it's something it can be seen that it can be seen quite, you can see it quite clearly how people come to the temple. It doesn't take much for them to start dancing in kirtan. Often they look, they're in such bliss and they're so happy, but there may still be lots of attachments there, but they're loving the devotee association. Yeah, so that person is a eligible candidate for at some point taking the process very seriously. At the point you could say initiation, they are eligible. The eligibility. So in one sense, it's quite low, isn't it? Quite a low eligibility is required to take up bhakti. Yeah. And that's another chapter. It's called the purity of devotional service. So that this will expand on this point even more. Yeah. Okay. Again, this question is brought out. So attraction to Krishna is the only qualification. But how does this attraction come about? Yeah. Can everyone ask that? If you ask that as a question, how does that attraction come about? It's not a trick question. So how does that attraction come about? Satyakumar?
Actually, that inquiry reminds me of, I think it's Narada Muni, and he said by taking the remnants of the Bhaktivedantas, he developed attraction, I think, for Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, very good. So in other words, what you're explaining is the mercy of the devotees. Yeah. That's why this verse is here. Prabhupada quotes this verse on account of his association. Yeah, the answer's here. With Mahatmas, or great souls, 100%. So they're 100% engaged. One may attain a little bit of attraction for Sri Krishna. Yeah. Just like Prabhupada himself, he was 100% engaged in devotional service, and he attracted so many people to him, and they're all coming with all types of attachments still for the material world. But because of Prabhupada's mercy, then they took up the principles of bhakti. Yeah. It only happened because, see, I've got my highlight, Prabhupada, by the mercy of the devotee. Yeah. On account of the association of Mahatmas, or great souls, those who are 100%, by their grace, we can get a little bit of attraction to Sri Krishna. Yeah. Again, this point, because generally people think that, especially a lot of people, when they come and they look at devotees, or they may think that renunciation is a prerequisite for beginning spiritual life. Not necessarily. Yeah. Actually, even for devotional service, too much renunciation can be an impediment towards bhakti. Does that make sense? Why does it make sense? Why would it be an impediment? Okay, let's give it to Sachikamani, Mike. You have to.
Actually, it's funny, Prabhu. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's in the right context, but I'm thinking Arjuna had some idea of renunciation, but that renunciation that he was thinking of wasn't going to really help him advance in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, he wanted to renounce his duties. It's interesting. It's not quite on the point, but it's an interesting point. Yeah. 2 hands raised. Mother Lisa, you can.
Prabhu, is it because if we give up things prematurely, then it's not real renunciation because then we're going to be thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely a valid point. You know, we may not be ready for it, and still the objects of the senses may be swimming in the mind. Yeah. Someone else had their hand raised. Well, here, there is, in other words, it can be an impediment in the sense that there are some paths of impersonal meditation, or some paths of yoga and meditation, where one has to learn to be detached from emotional and sensual activities, so-called. Yeah. So they actually do that as a strict sadhana. Yeah, they want to become, for them, entanglement means it means misidentification with the self and the dualities we face. So they try to negate all feelings of emotion. Yeah, and those who follow strictly will follow strict, but they don't engage. Well, they're not going to eat the Sunday feast anyway. There will be strict practices. Now, so that's more for yogis, etc. So this is what Rupa Goswami is bringing out here, that path of impersonal meditation, where one tries to restrict the senses, that can be an impediment to bhakti. Too much can be an impediment to bhakti, because bhakti is about engaging the senses in Krishna's service. Yeah, so that may be a difficulty for some. Yeah, so he mentioned, so renunciation, does that make sense? Is not necessarily a prerequisite. And if someone is following staunch renunciation, it may be an impediment for them to take up the activities of bhakti. I can give an example. Many, many years ago, there was one person who was coming to the temple, and he was coming from a very strict practice of yoga, very strict practice of some type of impersonalist yoga. And he was coming to the temple. He was attracted somehow. But then when he would see the varieties of prashadam that the devotees were eating, because he was quite used to following a very strict regime of not unnecessarily enjoying the senses, very kind of stark, simple diet. Yeah. Then when he came to the temple and he saw devotees eating the prasadam, he became very, very critical and couldn't understand it. Couldn't understand as this was part of spiritual life. Couldn't understand it. Couldn't relate to it. For him, spiritual life meant stopping, restriction, negating. So he couldn't take up. He became very critical of the devotees, and eventually he felt eventually he stopped coming. So that's an example where someone maybe too so-called on that path. So it can be an impediment, actually. Yeah. Okay. Now, Now then, if you look on, if you have your hard copy with you, it depends what hard copy you have, your edition. I have this one here. Okay, on page 29 and 30, chapter 3. Different grades of devotees is going to be spoken about, and it's here on the slide, you know. So as we mentioned, previously mentioned that the impetus for Vaidhi is following scriptural injunction. So knowledge in and faith in scriptures is considered a major consideration in determining one's adhikar or one's eligibility to advance. Yeah, so therefore, Rupa Goswami gives a person's depth of faith and knowledge. It will place one in one of these three categories. Yeah, so this first one here, or the one here, this is called means your adhikar is very weak. It's kanishta. Yeah, one whose faith is not very strong, who is just beginning, should be considered a neophyte devotee. Yeah. So it's called komal. It's very soft, not very strong faith. When one may discontinue the process of bhakti because one's faith is not very strong. Yeah. Now the next one, this is Madhyam. They may not know scripture arguments very well, but they have firm faith. They're called Madhyama. Yeah. Someone may give all types of so-called arguments against the principles of bhakti, and one may not be able to defend oneself with scripture. But they, as opposed to these here, they are not going to be dissuaded from their practice like these persons, because they have, this should be firm faith actually, not form faith. Yeah, they have firm faith. So even if they're not able to give scriptural arguments because they don't know scripture very deeply, they still continue the practice of bhakti. And then the topmost qualification, one who's expert in logic and understanding of the real scriptures, and who is not blind, so in other words, they see through the eyes of scripture, is to be considered a topmost devotee in devotional service. So this is another category that's given in the nectar of devotion. Yeah. So there's 3 grades of devotees that's given as more. So for the eligibility for advancing in devotional service, so we may be here, but we want to raise our qualification to here. And we do that by hearing. And you do that by taking part in Bhakti Sastri, okay? So we're learning very deeply the scripture here, specifically the nectar of devotion. Yeah. So this is the eligibility is being described more. The eligibility doesn't necessarily in the beginning, it doesn't require knowledge of or renunciation in the beginning, but to advance in devotional service, then we need to become knowledgeable in the principles of bhakti. Yeah. And when one will be classified according to these 3 principles of adhikar. Yeah. And there's further, now let's see, it's 12 o'clock, and there's further classification is given of devotees as well. And that's this slide here from the 7th chapter Bhagavad Gita. All right, but let's pause here, 12 o'clock. Let's get together at 7:15, okay? Sharp at 7:15, we're open up again, yeah? Okay? So see you then. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
I can't hear anything either.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, sorry, I put my microphone on mute by mistake. Hare
No
Krishna.
problem.
Hare Krishna. Okay, dear devotees, welcome back. Hare Krishna. As much as possible, if you can put your cameras on, it's inspiring to look at devotees rather than just a computer. Hare Krishna. So we're on chapter 3. This is looking at a quick review, although we've just gone over it. But the basic qualifications for practicing devotional service, and it basically introduces actually that there's no really prerequisites are not really needed. Yep. You don't prerequisites in even vast knowledge is not needed or any detachment. One just has some attraction. So we brought that out. And now, where does that attraction come from? It comes from Mahatmas. It comes from great devotees. So for those fully engaged in devotional service, by their grace and mercy, we can become attracted to their life and to devotional service. So one may not be renounced in the beginning, or one may not have much knowledge. So then we mentioned about Vaidhi is inspired by scriptural injunction. You're following scripture, not specifically a rag or a natural attraction. So it's based on scriptural injunction, scripture. So therefore, there's different grades of devotees given to their level of faith and knowledge in scripture. So we have the Kanishta, we have the Madhyam, and the Uttam. Yeah. So the idea here is that we may start here, but through hearing, the principles hearing and chanting, then we increase our eligibility, adhikar, yeah, for getting Krishna's mercy. So that's brought out here. And there's further classification is given as well. This is an interesting discussion that's there in the Nectar of Devotion. So this verse is quoted, Chato Vidurva Janti Mam Jana Sukritina Arjuna Atijignasi Atati Gani Chirpadadurshapa. Some of you, well, you've all studied you've all studied Bhagavad Gita. So I think this might have been one of your memorization verses. O best among the Bharats, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me. So begin. These are beginners. The distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. So again, this highlights the so these persons here, they've taken up devotion, but they're, for instance, they come with a specific motive. They have some desiring wealth, for example. So these are further classifications that's given by Rupa Goswami. So now there's examples of each of these that he gives. There's an example given for one who's distressed, one who's seeking wealth, the inquisitive, and one who's searching for knowledge of the Absolute. So there's examples given from Sastri of these 4. Yeah. And one of those given here is, this is a picture of Dhruva Maharaj. You see just on the left here. Yeah. So he took up the practice of bhakti, but he had a big material desire. It wasn't just a small one. He was very, very specific on why he was engaged in bhakti. He was quite straightforward. He wasn't trying to hide anything. He wanted a kingdom bigger than his father's and his great-grandfather's, which happened to be Lord Brahma. Yeah, so we know the story. Sure, we know it well. But in the end, he became purified, and he was disinclined to accept material benedictions. So by the mercy of the Lord, he gave up his desire for a kingdom and became a pure devotee. Now, what I want to highlight here he became a pure devotee because he went from here to here. By the grace of the Lord, he was full with knowledge. So with that knowledge, that devotional knowledge, Divya Gyan, he went from a mixed devotee to becoming a pure devotee. Or he went from a neophyte to becoming an advanced devotee. Why? Because of the Lord's blessings. And what did the Lord bless him with? The Lord blessed him with transcendental knowledge. Yeah. So he went from the beginning stages of bhakti, quite quickly actually, as we know the story, 6 months. It's taken us a bit longer. 6 months. So the other example is given of Gajendra. This is Gajendra Mokshana. You know this story. I think it's in the 8th canto, perhaps 8th or 9th canto. So Gajendra was also, it was quite clear, it was quite clear why he was rendering Gajendra the elephant, why he was offering this lotus to the Lord. It wasn't out of pure devotion. It was why? Because he was stressed out like anything. As we would be if we had this crocodile hanging on our leg. Yeah. So he was distressed, and that was the motivation for his praying to Krishna. So there was no he could still engage in devotion, but it was mixed. But eventually he also became a pure devotee because of his sangha with Lord Vishnu. So he became purified. Yeah. So he became greedy, to described here, one note, to attain the sweetness of the Lord. So he gave up his desire to get relief, and he became a uttama, or his adhikar then qualified him to become also a pure devotee. Yeah. So here we have the example of the 4 Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. They were seeking, they always get this mixed up, I think they were seeking knowledge. Yeah. They were seeking, yeah. So they also became, so by the mercy of the Lord, they were seeking liberation actually. Yeah. And there's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that describes that they became changed in mind. What's that verse goes to Shana Vinda Paradara Vinda Kinjauku Misha Torosi Makaranda Vayu. When they smelt the aroma of the tulsi leaves coming from the lotus feet of the Lord, they felt a change in both body and mind, although they was already convinced of the impersonal understanding. Yeah. As we know, the pastime, this is at the gates of Vaikuntha, and they had a disagreement with the doorkeepers at Vaikuntha, Jai and Vijay. And then Lord Vishnu came, yeah, and they had darshan of the Lord. This picture's nice picture. See they're looking at the lotus feet with tulsi, so they could smell the aroma, and the darshan of Vishnu completely brought them to the level of being pure, unadulterated devotees of the Lord. Yeah. So they began as, from one perspective, as neophytes and became greatly advanced. And then we have the similar as well, the sages of Naramsharanya. This is Shaunaka Rishi. This is the sages at Naramsharanya. They were inquisitive. And they were asking Sutta Goswami about Krishna. And thus they got the association of Sutta Goswami, and they became purified by his Shravanam Kirtanam of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. So in other words, yeah. So this is So the principle here for all of these here is sangha, is association. If one is fortunate to get this to associate with devotees, then he can be elevated from the first class to the second class to the third class. Yeah. So all these persons, Dhruva, Gajendra, the four Kumaras, and the sages of Namsharanya, they did have all one thing in common, is that they were all pious. Therefore, they went for shelter to the Lord. Yeah, that's what you could say designates a pious person. Everyone has to suffer in this material world. That's how the material is made up. Yeah. But for those who go to the church, the synagogue, the mosque, or the temple, whatever it may be, they are considered pious. Yeah. Those who don't, those who could say those who go to the local pub or whatever, they're when they meet distressful situations or they take drugs or all types of things, a pious person will go towards the Lord. But still, it's a material motive, so they're considered to be neophyte or kanishtas, beginning, but still they're attracted. And with the association of devotees and the knowledge which they give, they can become pure devotees. Yeah. So again, the type of sukriti here is the sukriti which comes by knowingly or unknowingly, serving the devotees. Okay? Again, if there's any questions or anything's not clear, please feel free to raise your hand, okay? Hopefully I can see your hand raised. I'm looking at Sachi Kumanima. Yes, please.
I just, when it's talking about eligibility there, Prabhu,
Yeah.
I was reminded of this song. I don't know how exactly, but I think the paraphrasing is that, you are the deliverer of the most fallen, and therefore my claim should be first. I should be considered eligible.
Yeah, that's thanks the song by Norton Das Thakur. Really brilliant. Yeah, because you're the savior of the most fallen. So therefore, I am definitely eligible for your mercy. Yeah, very good prayer. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah, so devotees are very intelligent. They know the Lord is very merciful to the fallen. So, my Lord, I am the most fallen. Yes, thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, so this is further classification of those who come to devotional service and how they may be purified. Okay, we have this example here. Dhruva, Gajendra. This may be a question that's asked of you as well. Please give examples of the 4 types of pious persons that come to devotional service. So here it is, Dhruva, Gajendra, the 4 Kumaras, and the sages that Naimi Sharanya. Okay. Now, having said that, Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 goes on to for further clarification of these 4. So then it mentions here. So this is 7:16. We go to here 7:18. All these devotees, those we just spoke about, are undoubtedly magnanimous. But of all of them, one who's situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he's sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. So we've already mentioned it to some degree, but what's been highlighted here is out of the 4 types of neophytes, the one who is very wise is very dear to Krishna. Now, why is that? Because he's not necessarily seeking an exchange of material benefits. He's seeking knowledge about Krishna. He's not necessarily seeking an exchange. Now it should be noted, I've already pointed it out in speaking about these 4, but it should be noted that each one of these 4 again they eventually came to the point of having knowledge. Yeah, so they advanced where they was endowed with transcendental knowledge, and that's been highlighted here. Yeah. So a wise man then is someone who becomes attached to Krishna, but does not want from him or being not necessarily being relieved from distress or gaining money. Yeah. So that's someone is wise. That's a wise person. Does not want anything in return from Krishna. Yeah. And the other day I was in Holland Barrett, and there's one Indian girl there, lady, she's working there. And each time I go in there, she asks me to pray for Krishna for her. And because she's praying to Krishna and she's not getting what she wants. So she wants me to pray. She's quite straightforward. But I didn't ask her what she wants. I'm guessing she wants a husband. That's my guess. She wants me praying to Krishna. So she's quite, yeah. But more advanced person is not, as again, Anyabilasa Sanyam, Gana Kamadi Anavritam, Anokulena Krishna, no Silana Bhakti Uttama. So pure devotee, they will be happy with what Krishna may see to give them, or what Krishna may see for them not to have. They're quite happy, engaged in the principles of Shravanam, Kirtanam. Yeah. So they do not want anything in return, either for relieving distress or gaining money. It's quite a common reason for coming to a temple, going to a mosque or synagogue or church, etc. Yeah. I know there's some churches in America, it's quite explicit that the only reason they exist and the only reason they encourage everyone to pray to God is so that they can become rich. What's it called? It's called the Prosperity Church. The prosperity preachers. Yeah. And they try and inspire the congregation to give vast amounts of money, and then vast amounts of money, they say, will come back to you. Yeah, prosperity. So it's quite blunt. It's quite gross. Why the only reason they're in the church is to beg the Lord for some material gain. Yeah, Sachikamani, you had your hand raised. I saw something flash up on the screen.
Yes, Prabhu. I was just thinking of another kind of classification of motivation that Prabhupada explains about Dharma, Artha, Karma, and Moksha. It's also
yeah, that's for material desire. Dharma, Artha, Karma, and Moksha. Yeah, desire for liberation. Now, having said that, although it's not mentioned here, it is mentioned akamo shava kama va moksha kama udaraditi vrena bhakti yogena yujeti purusham param. Actually, whatever you may want, whether you want liberation or you don't want liberation or whatever, you should go to Krishna. Yeah. You should go to Krishna. Yeah. Because inevitably, by coming to Krishna, like these four people, Shava, Kama, Moksha, desiring all types of things, you become purified of all your material attachments. Yeah. And you're satisfied just with the sweet darshan and service of Krishna. Yeah. So it's mentioned there. It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Akamo shavam kamo va moksha kamo udadadi. Someone who's broad-minded, then they will go to Krishna. All right. So we have respect for everyone who comes to Krishna. That's the main thing. And remember, there's no prerequisites. So we mentioned this as well before. So if someone comes to the temple, then we don't ask them if they're following the regulative principles before they can enter. Yeah, probably not many will be able to enter. So there's no prerequisites. Come in and engage in devotional service. Yeah. That's okay. So now then, moving here. Okay. So wise man. Bahunam janmanan ante ganavan mam papatite vasudeva samamiti samahatma sadulaba. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Okay. So this is 719. You see, there's these verses 716, 718, 719. There's a progression, yeah? So after many births, one is elevated to the position of a Jnani, yeah? Or a wise man. Okay, so this Krishna mentions of all these four, one who is situated in knowledge of me. Yeah? So that may be many births and deaths, yeah? So basically, without being elevated to a wise person, one may not be able to stick to the principles of worship of Krishna. Yeah. And then think Prabhupada mentions there that he quotes again Bhagavad Gita, for those who less intelligence, they have intelligence, but it's been taken away, it's been stolen. Yeah. And it's been stolen by Maya. Yeah. It's been stolen away. So they use their intelligence to maybe engage in worship of different demigods. Yeah. Why? Because they're influencing the influence of the modes of material nature. Yeah. Then Prabhupada points out, actually, someone who is wise, they understand that their spirit soul. Yeah. And there's more to life than shopping. Yeah. They're not just simply a body, they're spirits. That's Prabhupada's definition of a wise person. Yeah, that they know their spirit soul. They have some understanding, at least theoretically, that their spirit and Krishna is the supreme spirit. Yeah, and ultimately, intimate relationship for the materialistic person, their intimate relationship is with the body. Yeah, but for someone who's wise, then their intimate relationship is with Krishna. One understands I'm not the body. Yeah. Therefore, let me develop my intimate relationship with Krishna. Yeah. But on the material platform, one is in a very close, intimate relationship with their own body or the body of someone else. Yeah. And then Prabhupada also explains, the distress, the man who's in person who wants money, they're in the material concept of life. Yeah. Because distress and need of money is connected, are both in relationship to the body. But one who is a bit inquisitive, they're a little bit above those who are distressed and need of money, but still they're on the material platform. Yeah, inquisitive. Now, then further, someone who is wise actually seeks Krishna and knows perfectly that he is spirit soul. Again, that Krishna is the supreme spirit soul. He's just paraphrasing here directly from the Nectar of Devotion. Krishna is the supreme spirit soul, the Para Brahman. Yeah. He knows then that I am subordinate and finite. So therefore, let me dovetail myself with that person who's infinite. That's the supreme soul, Krishna. And then Prabhupada he concludes that is the relationship of the wise man with Krishna. Yeah. And then Prabhupada goes on here, he explains very nicely that someone would like to read this quote here for us, yeah, from Prabhupada.
Can read
Any
it.
readers out there?
In the material world, everyone is trying to be the topmost head man among all his fellow men or neighbors. Either communally, socially, or nationally, everyone is competing to be the greater than all others in the material concept of life. This greatness can be extended to the unlimited, so that one actually wants to become one with the greatest of all, the Supreme Lord. This is also a material concept, although maybe a little more advanced.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So Prabhupada points this out. This is generally, I think Prabhupada, Prabhupada was meeting, this is in Lilamrita, where Srila Prabhupada was meeting with the executives of Dai Nippon. Now, Dai Nippon were I think, Japanese company, printers, and they were vying for Prabhupada's business of printing these books. And I was really vying to the extent that they hired a Rolls Royce to pick Prabhupada up from the airport to actually take them to their office. So they wanted his business. So Prabhupada was discussing some details of the business transaction, printing his books. And then eventually all the executives left the office and there was one junior there. And Prabhupada asked him directly, what's the goal of your life? Prabhupada was preaching to him, what's the goal of your life? And in the place where everyone was previously sitting, they had all left their cards there. Yeah, their Pacific cards with their personal details. So he took order quite dramatically. His card was at the bottom, being the junior. So he took his card out from the bottom and he put it on the top. This is the goal of my life. So he wanted to be the top man in the business. He wanted to be topmost. Yeah. Yeah, and then Prabhupada mentions here that devotional, though we mentioned that the eligibility, anyone can take it up if they have some attraction, even knowledge in the beginning is not required, yeah, or knowledge or detachment. But devotional service is not possible to actually advance in devotional service. One does have to be free from being affected materially or from material affection. Let me just explain this. Yeah, Prabhupada says, as stated before, there are three kinds of happiness: material, spiritual, and devotional. Devotional service and the happiness, the happiness of devotion, this is part I missed out, due to its execution are not possible as long as one is materially affected. Yeah. Now, what's that material affection? That's mentioned in the quote here. For someone who desires material enjoyment, they won't be able to experience the happiness of pure devotion, of pure motivation that a pure devotee experiences, the taste one gets from that pure exchange between the soul and the Supreme Soul. So if someone is coming to devotion and are not purified of their material reasons for coming, they're not going to experience the higher taste, param drishtva. Yeah, so Prabhupada mentions if someone has a desire for material enjoyment, or from a so-called, here mentioned what we quoted, of becoming one with the Supreme, it may seem fantastic from a material point of view that one renounced the world and one wants to therefore become so-called one with Brahman. But that's also a material concept. Yeah. Now, the reason why they may be aspiring for such a thing, because they think that becoming one is going to free them from all what makes up the material world, being anxiety. Yeah. Now, these in person, they cannot appreciate that. In other words, that spiritual happiness and ultimately the exchange of loving affairs with Krishna is the ultimate, with the Supreme is the ultimate goal. Yeah. But their ultimate goal is to become one with the Lord. That's what's mentioned here. Their concept is simply an extension, Prabhupada mentions, of the material idea. Yeah. Then we have the quote here. In the material world, I read it again. Everyone is trying to be the topmost head man or his fellow man or neighbors, okay? Either communally, socially, or nationally. Everyone is competing to be greater than the others, and this is definitely going on in the world at the moment, as it always is. Yeah, one nation against another nation. All in material concept of life. This greatness can be extended even to the unlimited, that one wants to become one with the greatest of all. This is material concept. Yeah. Now Prabhupada mentions, however, I just read directly from here from the Nectar of Devotion. However, the perfect spiritual concept of life is complete knowledge of one's constitutional position, in which one knows enough to dovetail himself with the transcendental service of the Lord. One must know that he is finite and the Lord is infinite. Thus, it is not possible to actually become one with the Lord, even if one aspires for this. It is simply not possible. Ye ni ravindaksha vimuktaman in us. It's just an imagination in their mind. Therefore, anyone who has any desire or aspiration for satisfying his senses by becoming more and more important, either in a material sense or in a spiritual sense, cannot actually relish the sweet taste of devotional service. Okay, so as we mentioned, one may come to devotional service to actually experience the real sweet taste of devotional service. One should come to the level of pure devotee. Yeah, so one should become purified by the association of the Lord or the Lord's devotees. Yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Let's just now. And Rupa Goswami, in this regard, he then brings out what he considers the desire of kind of bhakti, if one is serving the Lord with a desire for material enjoyment, or moksha, liberation. Yeah. He describes that one is haunted. One is haunted by here. He compares being possessed, someone is possessed of these two bhakti and mukti. They're influenced by the black art of a witch. in both cases, one is in trouble. So, you know, bhakti means material enjoyment, and mukti means to be free of material anxiety and to become one with the Lord. So it can be subtle. It's something, right, that we have to kind of be aware of, because we are Chaturveda Bhajanti Mam. We have come to devotion generally for one of these reasons or mixture of them. So one might be to get relief from material distress. But as we take up and we associate and we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, hopefully our desires change. And as they change and become more purified, we will experience what was described as the sweet taste of devotion. But if we are just concerned about, if we just maintain the desire to be free of suffering, I want to be free of suffering, and we're not developing appreciation and affection for Krishna, then we may be influenced, what Rupa Goswami says, by the black art of a witch. It's quite graphically describes, you know. So Prabhupada describes here. These desires for bhakti and mukti are compared to being haunted by ghosts and witches. Okay? Because while these aspirations for material enjoyment or spiritual oneness with the Supreme remain, one cannot relish the actual transcendental taste of devotional service. So this witch here, flying about here, is going to, if we're still maintaining attachment to becoming one or just to get relieved to be free of material anxiety, then this is going to deprive us of the sweet taste that the soul feels in exchanges of love with the Supreme Soul. Yeah, because we're not desiring Krishna, we're desiring something for ourselves. Yeah, so therefore one cannot actually enjoy, dare I use that word, one cannot actually relish the original relationship of the soul with the Supreme Soul, which is based on love and affection. So anyway, Rupa Goswami mentions here, one is haunted by ghosts and witches. Okay, and also this verse is then quoted. We read these Shik Ashtakam every Sunday. We have in the temple. We read these. Good if devotees know these verses from Lord Chaitanya. Shik Shashtakam. Nadanam Najanam Na Sundarim Kavatam Bhadakat Isha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanisvare Bhagavat Bhakti Hoiti Tabe. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. Yeah. So this is a further definition of pure devotional service. Okay. A pure devotee, in other words, doesn't care for liberation. Yeah? The only thing they want is your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. You know, I do not want material happiness in the form of many followers, nor, Prabhupada explains, immense opulence of wealth, nor beautiful wife, nor cessation from material existence. Let me take birth again and again. But I pray, the only thing I pray from you is that my devotion unto you may remain unflinching. And that's a common prayer you're going to read throughout the Bhagavatam. And there's the next chapter actually is just prayers in this regard about how devotee prays, not for liberation, and that's the next chapter. And there's some, here. Someone could read this for us here. This is Bhuvamangala Thakur. He prays in this way. Any readers there? Anyone could unmute and read away?
If I am engaged in devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily can I perceive your presence everywhere. And as far as liberation is concerned, I think liberation stands at my door with folded hands, waiting to serve me.
Yeah, so it comes automatically. Yeah, one gets liberated from a material existence, and devotees are not even focused on it. They're actually focused on Krishna. Yeah, but you got someone's completely focused on moksha. But devotees are not focused on moksha, but they get moksha, they get liberated from the material world. As Bhuvamangala Thakur says, liberation saying, yes, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? Liberation is waiting to serve the pure devotees. Yeah. And there's another, I'll just read this here. This is from 3rd canto, 4th chapter, text 15. This is Uddhava's speaking to Krishna. My dear Lord, for persons who are engaged in your transcendental loving service, there is nothing worth obtaining from religiousness. Karma, Artha, Moksha is mentioned here, what Sachikamar Nimai said. There is nothing worth obtaining from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, or moksha, or liberation. Although happiness from these different sources can be easily had from them. So the happiness that one experiences here is, the example is given, one example we could give is someone is in prison and then they're released from prison. they experience a type of liberation. They've been liberated. But actually, what they do when they leave prison is more important. What they're going to be engaged in. So someone who achieves some level of impersonal realization of realization of Brahman, some level of within their mind, there may be some release from the stringent pangs of material existence if they understand their spirit soul. Yeah. But actually, that, as we've described before, that powers into insignificance the happiness experienced by a devotee of the Lord. Yeah. So continuing the verse, sorry. Although happiness from these different sources can be very easily had by them, in spite of such facilities, my dear Lord, I do not aspire to achieve any such results. My only prayer is that I may have unflinching faith and devotion unto your lotus feet. Okay, so for instance, this lady who I meet, this young girl who I see in Holland and Barrett, she's not praying to the Lord for unflinching faith and devotion. She wants something very material, and because she's not getting it, she is complaining. She's complaining. But so the prayer for purity, may I have unflinching faith and devotion to your lotus feet. And then here's another one I'll read here. This is from 3rd Canto, 25th chapter, verse. I think I've got these here, excuse me. Someone could read this verse here? Yeah, I put it on the slide, so you could read it. This is from Devahuti, okay? No, Kapila is advising Devahuti. Someone like the great opportunity. Go ahead. You're the most enthusiastic. Go ahead. Hare Krishna.
My dear mother, my pure devotees are charmed by seeing my different forms. The beauty of my face, the structure of my body, so enchanting. My laughing, my pastimes, and my glance appear to them so beautiful that their minds are always absorbed in thoughts of me, and their lives are dedicated fully unto me. Although such people do not desire any kind of liberation or any kind of material happiness, still I give them a place among my associates in the supreme abode.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's a beautiful verse. So this is what takes up the inner world of the devotee, the pure devotee. They're so charmed by the Lord's beautiful form, his face is so enchanting, his pastimes, etc., that the minds are always absorbed in brilliant thoughts of the Lord. So they're dedicated to him. Yeah, and they're not desiring anything material, but they end up getting placed in the most supreme abode in the whole of creation. Well, it's not even part of creation. So this is beautiful verse. Another verse as well from Lord Kapila. Someone could read this one. 325:34. This is the final slide here in chapter 3.
My dear mother, devotees whose hearts are always filled in the service of my lotus feet and who are prepared to do anything for my satisfaction, especially those fortunate devotees who assemble together to understand my qualities, pastimes, and form, and thus glorify me congratulatorily, and derive transcendental pleasure therefrom, never desire to become one with me. And what to speak of becoming one with me, if they are offered a post like mine, in my abode, or opulence like mine, or even personal association with me with similar bodily features, they refuse to accept because they are satisfied simply by being engaged in my devotional service.
Isn't it? It's quite a verse, isn't it? Even, remember we mentioned it earlier? We mentioned that as one of, devotees don't desire any type of liberation. There's different types of liberation. So even posts like his, I don't know what that might be, posts like God, or opulences, personals, because they're so satisfied by the sweet nectar that comes from service to the Lord. Yeah, they're completely satisfied with that. Okay, so that's beautiful. Now there's two other verses. If you look at the end of, and I didn't include them here, but you can read them yourselves. The end of chapter 3. There's another two verses. One, let me just look now. Dhruva, let me just read this verse from Dhruva. This is 4th canto, chapter 9, text 10. My dear Lord, the transcendental pleasure derived by meditation upon your lotus feet, which is enjoyed by the pure devotees, cannot be approached by the transcendental pleasure derived from impersonalists through self-realization. So how can fruitive workers, who at the utmost can aspire to promotion to the higher heavenly planets, understand you? How can they be described as enjoying a happiness similar to the devotee's happiness? Okay, so there is no comparison. Okay. So that ends chapter 3. Now, next week we're going to begin chapter 5. Okay, so what's happened to chapter 4? All right. Now, what I want to do this week, I'm going to give you a bit of homework this week. I hope you don't mind that scary word, homework. But because what chapter 4 it consists of, it's titled Devotional Service Surpasses All Liberation. And it consists of verse after verse similar to what we just read. So Rupa Goswami takes verses out of the Srimad Bhagavatam to substantiate this point, to make this point very strongly, that we do not become haunted by ghosts and witches and desiring liberation. So he makes this point very strongly by quoting from many places in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the quotes of pure devotees, yeah, how devotional service far surpasses liberation. So what we can do, what I want you to do is next week, just read that chapter. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8 pages. I'm sure you can manage it within the week, okay? If you just read through that. And then next start, if you can share one of the verses which you found particularly inspiring or particularly attractive to you. And then we can look at those verses. You could just read those verses, all right? So just keep that in mind. So again, read through chapter 4, begins on page 37, and it goes to page, at least in the hard copy I have, to page 46. And then you can share something. You may not read a whole verse, but there may be something in a verse that inspired you, and you can just share that. So 1 or 2 points you can share. Okay, is that clear? And then that will be the first part of next week's class. And then we'll start on chapter 5. Okay? So as you might notice, we're going to stop a little bit early today. I hope you don't mind. Hope that's okay. Is that okay with everyone? We can do like that. You can read through chapter 4 and then come back next week. You can share some inspiration from chapter 4. Then we'll go straight into chapter 5, which is, I think, it's the purity of devotional service. That's very important to cover. There's some wonderful points that are brought out in chapter 5. Yeah, just looking here, yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, I missed out. I got kicked out of the
Oh, sorry.
I got kicked out of the Zoom. So why are we skipping chapter 3?
Okay, chapter 4. We're not skipping chapter 4, but I want you to read chapter 4 the week as a homework, because it's just a list of verses which are substantiating the point that devotional service surpasses all liberation. So it's verse after verse.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you read through those verses and share something which you found inspiring in those verses at the beginning of next week's class, and then we get into chapter 5.
Okay.
Yeah, which is called the purity of devotional service. Then after that, we have then having how to discharge devotional service. Yeah, how to actually do it. That's described then in chapter 6 and going onwards. 7, 8 offenses to be avoided, etc. Okay. All right. Any last question or comment?
Yes, Prabhu. I had
Go ahead.
an inquiry that was coming up for me in the course of your sharing from some of the verses this week.
Yeah.
And that is about, and it might be based on my kind of Anishta Bhakti, but it occurs for me, just where the way I'm seeing it now, or the way it's occurring for me just now, is that some non-devotees, materialistic people who might be motivated by, I think Prabhupada included there, nationally or family or social, it occurs as though they are quite hardworking. And then when I compare their hard work to how my devotional service, there's a kind of thing that I wish I was as hardworking in devotional service as they are going about their activities. That's just I don't know. There's a kind of sentiment there, and yeah, when I look at myself and I think, in comparison to them, I might be even considered quite lazy, and I wish I was, actually more active, but I don't think I have the kind of motivations that they have materialistic, but even though I would like to think that it's somewhere towards Krishna, I still feel there's a gap that I could be more active in pursuing devotional service or devotional activities, or even looking after, like, being properly situated in terms of a livelihood, creating a livelihood for myself. Maybe that's the practical application of it all.
All right, it's a good point. It reminds me of Narada Muni, who's, remember that verse? He's glorifying Shishapal, is glorifying Kamsa. Why? Because they're really absorbed in Krishna. So he's inspired by that. So you're mentioning not exactly Krishna. Yeah, but from another sense, yeah, you can. Yeah, why not? If we're going to work hard, then we want to work hard for Krishna. But another perspective on that is that we should be intelligent and organize our life in such a way that we don't have to work hard like an ass. And we can spend most of our time in hearing and chanting. Yeah, that's the challenge that we have. It'd be good if we can organize our life in such a way, for example, for an early retirement, perhaps when we're 40 or 50 or something, so we can spend a large part of our life seriously cultivating devotional service. And of course, we want to work hard for Krishna, yeah. But you see, persons on a material platform, they're working hard just for material sense gratification. And then at the end of life, as we heard today, they're going to be thrown again into the cycle of birth and death. So if we're going to work hard, yeah, let's work hard for Krishna. But really intelligent person, we don't want to be working in the material world until we die. We want to, organize our life in such a way that we can hear and chant as much as possible. So that's another additional thoughts on that. But thank you for that, Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we might end today? Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, thank you, everyone. We had a good turnout today. It's always inspiring to me when there's a good turnout. I think everyone's here. Perhaps I can't. So it's great you all came this week. So please join us next week. And don't forget your homework for next week, and then we'll get together. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nectar Devotion ki jai. Rupa Goswami ki jai. Gaura Premanande. Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram. Hare Ram. Ram Ram. Hare Hare.